The final item of business today is the members' business debate on motion number 6283 in the name of John Wilson on Credit Union Expansion Project. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I would be grateful if those members who wish to speak in the debate could please press the request to speak buttons as soon as possible. And I call on John Wilson to open the debate. 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Firstly, I would like to thank all the members across the political parties who signed my motion to allow this debate to take place. My interest in credit unions is long-standing, although it has been strengthened by the virtue of the fact that I am currently the convener of the cross-party group on credit unions. And I'm glad to say, Presiding Officer, we are joined tonight by members of the cross-party group and credit unions who are sitting and listening to this debate with interest. The growth of credit unions throughout Scotland is in itself noteworthy. There are now 108 credit unions in Scotland, and since 2007 there has been a significant 47% growth in membership. This goes to show that this is an important debate in many ways, since not only does the expansion of credit unions highlight the vital role credit unions play themselves, but also underlines the approach taken by the UK and Scottish governments in recognising that the community banking sector placed on an equal footing with equivalents around the globe. Credit unions have evolved over the years, although it is important to recognise, just as the Credit Union Expansion Project does, that a step change is required. The Association of British Credit Unions, ABCUL to give its name that it's commonly known by, have been contracted by the DWP to effectively modernise credit unions by growing them through monthly achievable growth targets and introducing new savings products. Also, it is significant that the expansion project will be staged. For example, Scottish credit unions currently taking part in phase 1 of the project include First Alliance Ayrshire Credit Union and Pollock Credit Union, with further credit unions joining the project on the 1st of August and on the 1st of November this year. In terms of the work that credit unions do in central Scotland, then this is illustrated by the fact that credit unions can demonstrate a real difference in communities and get people, especially in deprived areas, to develop the savings habit. Although, as the recent report issued by Civitas at the start of this week underlined that much more work needs to be undertaken on growing, especially with regard to growing the credit union movement. The sector is relatively small when we compare this to the USA or other countries where credit unions serve 1/3 of the country's population. In the USA, many employers offer credit union membership as condition of their employment. The potential of credit unions has been recognised by both the Scottish and UK governments, emphasising the role they are playing in countering the payday loan companies and many high street retailers who charge APR rates as well above the 29.9% APR charged by store cards. I'd like to acknowledge the good work credit unions do in encouraging people to save and take out affordable loans as a long-term alternative to the expensive payday loan lenders and high street retailers. Although it is worth saying that the OFT has been criticised as ineffective by the Public Accounts Committee at Westminster with reference to payday loan companies, when we see that there have only been 2 payday loan companies who have had their licences revoked for lending. Also, credit unions are an important cornerstone of developing viable alternative options to other financial service providers, such as banks, for many families and individuals living on low incomes. Credit unions, as strong mutual business, can take a longer-term view rather than the short-termism in its approach that traditional banks or building societies currently take. Recent research from Lloyds Banking Group highlighted the problems that second steppers have in the mortgage market, found that they could not move on and were trapped in their first-time buyer home. This research noted that many people were being forced to borrow off their parents, otherwise known as the bank of mum and dad, to find their deposits. the Glasgow Credit Union has recognised this problem and is offering a mortgage that is tailored specifically for second steppers. Scottish Government, in terms of its new banking strategy, recognises that credit unions can compete with commercial banks in the financial services sector. There is a need, as Civitas think tank highlights, to recognise that credit unions can often make a loss on loans under £1,000 due to the administration fees applied. While there is a need for credit unions to develop stronger level of participation, as agreed in the £38 million credit union expansion project, it is still vital the ethos of credit unions and mutuality is not lost. We have seen the demise of building societies to a large degree, and to some extent with the recent developments at the cooperative bank highlight a worrying fear where, particularly in the cooperative bank, took on large loan debts from Britannia Building Society and now facing the consequences of that deal. I am aware that the regulations of financial services are a reserved matter, although the Scottish Government clearly has a role in developing solutions, particularly with regard to legal matters, that has an impact on credit unions and also ensuring the partnership role can be maintained. I recognise the good work taking place by credit unions not only throughout central Scotland, but throughout the whole of Scotland. Credit unions are decentralised and based on the mutuality this leads to them still having a focus that other financial service providers seem to have misplaced. I note and welcome the fact that the Scottish Government has placed a high priority on credit unions, delivering not only an alternative, but also offering mainstream financial provision that will assist many low-income communities. Presiding Officer, we see today a real alternative to the multinational banking system that is currently in crisis. We have to give people in communities throughout Scotland, particularly those in low-income communities, the opportunity to be involved in saving and borrowing that is credible and gives them rates and security that they can afford. We have to take forward this case for the credit union movement, and I hope that the Scottish Government will work alongside ABCO and others to ensure that we see a real growth in the credit union sector in Scotland that will make us proud to actually see local communities engaging in that process, that actually offers a real alternative to the payday loan companies and others who make their fortunes out of the poor and those on low incomes. I move my motion.
Thank you very much. And we now turn to the open debate. Speeches of 4 minutes, please. Kezia Dugdale, to be followed by Sandra White.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Can I first of all congratulate John Wilson on securing this debate and indeed welcome the Chief Executive of ABCO to the Parliament today. I know that John is very committed to the credit union movement and indeed chairs the cross-party group which will be commencing after this debate finishes tonight. Can I also draw members' attention to my register of interest where I'm listed as a co-op sponsored MSP and also as a member of Capital Credit Union. I'm very pleased that John Wilson's motion today references the high-cost lenders because I want to talk a little bit about the payday loan industry and then talk about the credit union's ability to respond to that. I think it's important to recognise that the payday loan industry was worth £2.2 billion to the UK economy last year. And companies like Wonga have gone from operating at a loss in 2006-07 to having profits in the tens of millions last year. In fact, payday loan companies are one of the fastest growing industries in the UK at the moment, which really tells us everything we need to know about the state of the economy and how hard it is for people to make ends meet at the moment. There really is just too much month at the end of the money for too many families across Scotland, and it's no surprise really that they end up in the arms of payday loan companies, given their prevalence on our high streets, on our airwaves, online, in our inboxes, in our mobile phones. They really are absolutely everywhere. The first and foremost thing we need to do is to cap the cost of credit. I think it's perverse that we have a maximum interest rate that credit unions can charge on loans at 26.8%, but payday loan lenders can charge what they like. And that's why Wonga and companies like that can charge in excess of 4,000% APR without any consequences. We know that payday loan companies are only in the United Kingdom because they've been kicked out of every state in America, state by state, and countries like Germany have a maximum interest rate of 40%. That tells me very clearly, Presiding Officer, that if we were to cap the cost of credit in this country, we would be able to cut the legs from these companies very, very quickly. Credit unions, however, have a very important role, I think, to play in offering affordable or accessible alternatives to short-term loans. And the best example I can point to would probably be Blantyre Credit Union, who recently made a presentation to the cross-party group on credit unions. And let me tell Parliament that they did a little evaluation into the product, that they were able to offer a sort of fast 500 and instant access loan of £500 that you could get very much on the same terms as a payday loan, but without the extortionate interest rates. Blantyre Credit Union managed to lend out 2,900 short-term loans, and they were able to evidence that those 2,900 loans saved that particular community £500,000 worth of saved interest. That was £500,000 back into the pockets of low earners, back into the local economy through local spend. A huge amount of preventative spend, and that's a clear message I would like to get across to the Minister, that when he says there's no money to invest in credit unions, I want him to appreciate and understand the extent to which credit unions are preventative spend and will help him further down the line. But the Blantyre Credit Union experience isn't just about saving people money, it was also about how it transformed their entire financial habits. Those same 2,900 people that borrowed from Blantyre instead of Wonga or another company like that were able to amass £113,000 worth of savings between them within 12 months. That completely transformed their financial habits. So not only did it address an instant upfront financial need, but it also allowed them to really get a grip of their finances and think longer term about how they could fund their lives and their families and their future. So I have met the Minister on this issue before, and I've put forward to him an idea that I have, and I'm very grateful to have the support of ABCO for it, for a loan guarantee fund which would build on the credit union expansion project and help credit unions lend to people who wouldn't otherwise meet their affordability criteria. I know the Minister has promised me an answer to that request by the end of June, and I very much look forward to hearing it. So finally, Presiding Officer, can I once again congratulate John Wilson on bringing this debate to the Chamber, and I look forward to the rest of the debate.
Thank you very much. This is a popular debate and we're unable to extend tonight, so I must ask members if they could keep to their 4 minutes. Sandra White, to be followed by Neil Finlay.
Thank you very much, excuse me, Presiding Officer. And can I also congratulate John Wilson in securing this debate. It's a very, very important debate, and I know how much work John has done with the credit unions. In fact, before of a previous life of John in an MSP, I used to go along to Ladywell, which is my constituency now, and ask John and others for advice on debt matters, and that's where I actually know John from, is a low pay unit. So it's a little surprise that he's pushed forward in the credit union issues, and I also congratulate ABCO in winning the contract, which obviously will see credit unions be able to expand throughout the country, and it's something which I think is very important. I really, admire Kezia Dugdale. Her speech touched all the right issues, I believe, and was delivered, very, very, very well. And I would also, ask the Cabinet Secretary, the Minister, perhaps in his closing remarks, that what we as a government or as a Parliament can do to actually, not just expand, because credit unions are very good at expanding themselves, and this contract will certainly see that, to basically, make more people aware of credit unions, not just, people out there, but people here in the Parliament also. I know there is a credit union here, but a lot of people don't know about the credit union system. They may think that it's only for people who don't have certain earnings. So I think it's important that we get that message out to everyone, that we can all benefit from credit unions, not just by saving, but by putting money in as well. And I think that's a very important point. I want to give a wee bit of background to credit unions. And I remember my dad, many, many years ago, belonging to a credit union and being able to go down there and save money and get money out, as you say, at reasonable rates, and not being ripped off by the Wonga.coms and others as well. And what I always admired about credit unions was the fact that they were financial cooperatives, owned by their members, operate under common bond criteria, and meaning that they basically serve the people and for the people, and profits are distributed to members through dividends, and members really have a say in how the credit union is run. And I think that's really very, very important. It's a grassroots operation which is there for the people, and they can benefit from it also. And you know, it's not just about saving money and being able to get money back. It's also about training as well. And a lot of people don't seem to realise that many people that I know and others will know started off as savers in credit unions, wanted to get involved in a voluntary aspect of it, came into the credit union, and basically were given, you know, the capability to understand finance, training and budgets and financial management, and that was a great tool for them. And some of them went on to get employment through that aspect of the training you got from credit unions, and that's what I admire very, very much about it. Now, Glasgow Credit Union has been mentioned, and it was actually founded in 1989, and I think perhaps someone else is going to mention them, to basically for the employees of Glasgow District Council, and it has expanded greatly since then. And, you know, 30,000 people are members of Glasgow Credit Union, and earlier this year it became the first UK credit union to reach £100 million in assets. Now, that's a lot of money, you know, for a credit union, and that's helping all of the people who have, you know, basically put money in there and trained and learned from there. And when you think of it as called Glasgow Credit Union, it's actually larger than the smaller UK-wide building societies, and that shows you the greatness of credit unions. And as I said before, regardless of what happens, and I would like to actually make this point, regarding advertising for credit unions, I think it would be very important that everyone is made aware of it. But I also think it's rather crass of Douglas Alexander trying to put in scaremongering by sending out press releases that credit unions would not be viable, if it was a yes in an independent Scotland. And I thank the credit union managers who turned around and said, sorry, that is definitely not on. We will still be there and we will still be supported. Thank you very much, Presiding Officer.
Thank you very much. And now call Neil Findlay to be followed by Mary Scanlon.
Thanks, Presiding Officer. Can I also thank John Wilson for bringing forward this debate and for the work he does in the cross-party group. I can also, at this point, offer my apologies for my absence at the group tonight, as I have to be elsewhere. I also want to declare an interest as a member of Blackburn and Seafield Credit Union, an organisation that, along with West Lothian Credit Union, does tremendous work in my area. The terms of the motion before us today refers to the credit union expansion project, and people have rightly highlighted how the £38 million will, we hope, allow credit unions to grow, to expand, to increase membership and savings and grant more low-interest loans. All of this is excellent stuff that I fully support, but I want to speak about credit unions and welfare reform. In the last few months, the bedroom tax has gone from a bad idea to a real-life here-and-now crisis for thousands of our fellow citizens. And while this living nightmare is hugely significant, it's a mere drop in the ocean compared to what is coming. Especially when universal credit, including the housing element, is paid direct to the tenant rather than the landlord. This will undoubtedly mean that tenants and their families under pressure to feed and clothe their kids might, in desperation, make the choice to buy food or shoes as opposed to paying the rent. Or tenants with an addiction problem may, in desperation or under duress, use that money to feed that addiction rather than pay their rent. Or it could be that a violent or controlling member of the family who will receive the payment on behalf of the family might spend it elsewhere rather than on housing. This will without doubt lead to major problems for a large number of tenants and their families. Having worked as a frontline housing officer, I know this will be the case unless we act, and we act now. So what can be done about it? Well, a number of credit unions across the UK have been working on new products to help with budgeting, particularly for this client group. The main way in which they're doing this is through so-called jam jar or budgeting accounts. These accounts would give tenants an active account where the benefit is paid in. The tenant mandates the payment to the landlord, who is first calling the monthly cash payment, with any residual cash left in the account or put on a card for the tenant to use. Now, some accounts would also provide a small overdraft to help with working cash. If this was rolled out across the country, it could save families from crisis, prevent evictions, and I believe quite literally save lives. 2 weeks ago, I met with civil servants along with representatives from West Lothian Credit Union to discuss funding to help them roll out a scheme that they have developed. To my astonishment and dismay, we were told, yes, it was a good idea, but unfortunately there was just no funding stream available to help with this project. Presiding Officer, I don't intend to shoot the messenger. Those civil servants were just doing their job. But I must ask the Government, what is going on here? We have a simple solution that could help hundreds of thousands of our most vulnerable people across Scotland. Yet when presented with the solution, the Scottish Government appear at best ambivalent. Presiding Officer, this is not good enough. We need action now because the crisis is here now. Today I spoke to ABCUL, an excellent organisation at their Manchester head office. They tell me that they are likely to be developing new budgeting projects in partnership with the credit unions over the next 2 years of the expansion project. But, Presiding Officer, welfare reform is not 2 years away. Welfare reform is here, now, and by that time, people will have lost their tenancies, they'll have lost their families, and I fear some of these people will have lost their lives. So I hope the Minister will speak to the Housing Minister and urgently look into these matters. Here is an area where this Parliament can help people now with the powers that we have. We have to act now, Minister, not in 2 years' time or not sometime in the future. We have to act now.
Thank you very much. I now call Mary Scanlon to be followed by John Mason.
Thank you. I also thank John Wilson for giving us this opportunity to welcome the announcement that ABCUL have been awarded the contract to deliver a £38 million credit union expansion project. And I will check if I've signed this motion. And I would also welcome those from the credit union movement to the gallery today. £38 million is a substantial sum of money going to a sector which has so much potential to respond to the financial demands and challenges facing people today. Credit unions should be the choice rather than payday loans, and much more needs to be done to assist the 7 million people UK-wide who currently fall into the trap of high-cost credit, many being charged exorbitant interest on loans. There are currently around 108 credit unions in Scotland, and as Sandra White said, the largest percentage of members is undoubtedly in Glasgow. I helped the Inverness Credit Union to get set up many years ago, and I understand the difficulties of getting volunteers, the training required, the stringent financial rules and regulations, and indeed the accessibility of the credit union, as well as concerns over confidentiality. But there is also greater scope for employers to encourage payroll deduction to participate in a credit union, whether in the private, voluntary or the public sector. And the police credit union sets a very good example, as outlined in John Mason's motion on this issue. The penetration rate for credit unions across the UK is less than 3%, compared to 72% in Ireland. There are 399 credit unions in Ireland, with a total membership of over 3 million, and a further 101 in Northern Ireland. And yet, across the whole of England, Scotland and Wales, we have 396, less than in the Republic of Ireland. The banking crisis has contributed to a willingness on the part of the public to consider alternative financial institutions, and the community-based nature of credit unions has enhanced their appeal, but more can be done. I'm a member of the British-Irish Parliamentary Association, and a paper was recently done by John Robertson, MP for North East Glasgow. And he reported that many cases in Glasgow, many cases of people using high-cost lenders when they might just as easily have approached the credit union a few doors down the street. So this needs to be understood if credit unions are to become the preferred choice. One reason given for approaching the payday lender was the ease, speed and accessibility of the process. So more could be done to examine the way that credit unions offer services to make them more attractive and more accessible, and the money will help. Between 2006 and 2012, 113 million was allocated to more than 100 credit unions in the UK from a growth fund by the DWP. Although this fund was successful in making relatively low-cost loans more readily available to credit union customers, evaluation of the Growth Fund concluded that it was not possible for credit unions to achieve sustainability unless they could reduce their costs further by improving services, attracting more members and maximising profitable income. The 38 million that we are debating today is an opportunity to achieve this. Also, a link with the Post Office has been suggested, and I'm just going to finally quote from Lord McFall, his speech in the House of Lords. He stated, "One problem with credit unions is they're seen as a poor man or woman's bank. But on another level, if credit unions are to grow and become fully established as a potent force, they need to attract from a full spectrum of savers." I agree with that.
Many thanks. And I now call John Mason, to be followed by Anne McTaggart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and may I also thank John Wilson for bringing forward this motion today. It seems to me that we as a society need to move on a number of fronts, one being to improve the level of financial education, to reduce the level of indebtedness, and to encourage responsible rather than irresponsible lending. On financial education, I think there are some good things happening. Both commercial lenders and credit unions are often in the schools encouraging young people to budget and to save. More widely, there has grown up a culture of borrowing which we certainly need to break. Most recently, we've seen the sad state of affairs at Hearts, but we have seen it across the board with governments, businesses and individuals borrowing too much. But we have to say that borrowing is by no means always a bad thing if it is responsible and can be repaid. It may well be used for an unexpected crisis or for a planned bigger expenditure, for example, a car or a house, where hopefully the asset will last for several years, during which time the loan can be repaid. But sadly, we have seen in recent years people get hopelessly swamped in debt, and very often the guilty party has been the irresponsible lender. For me, that has to be the key advantage of credit unions. More than any other lender I'm aware of, they want the best for the borrower and not just a quick profit for themselves. It clearly has been a challenge to grow credit unions over the years, and we've heard already of a few other countries which seem to have been more successful, for example, Ireland and Canada, which have much higher percentage memberships. In 2010, Ireland had over 3 million members out of a population of 4.5 million, which is 66% membership. Canada had 10.6 million out of a 33 million population, which is about 30%. And when you look at the membership in the economically active population, it's even higher, with Ireland at 75% and Canada at 46%. Whereas in Scotland we sit around 6%, albeit in Glasgow I understand it's about 25%. And a good example is the Glasgow Credit Union, which in 2008 had 20,000 members and I believe now has 32,000. I think one argument has been that credit unions sometimes in this country have been seen as very close to the establishment, even though they are actually independent. Or, as Mary Scanlon just said, they've been seen mainly for poorer people. Whereas in other countries, they seem to be seen as much more distinct from government and also have memberships right across society. If that is the case, then public funds may not always be the best way to grow them. However, given that we are where we are, I do very much agree that encouragement of credit unions through this expansion project is very much to be welcomed. Now, if, as Neil Findlay suggests, more effort or more money should be put into credit unions, perhaps from the Scottish Government, then I think he does also need to explain where that is to come from, be it a cut in the health service or whatever. I'm sorry, I'm pushed for time. Given the lack of confidence in the banking system, this is clearly the right time to encourage better alternatives. However, I would have to say in passing that not all banks are bad. I do have one branch of the Airdrie Savings Bank in my constituency, and I consider them to be the traditional type of bank with a personal service that we certainly want to encourage. There are a number of local credit unions based in my constituency. However, one national one based there is the Scottish Police Credit Union, which I'm delighted to have at Barachne and which I visited last month. They have recently launched a new product called Flexi Loan, or revolving credit, and I think this is a good example of credit unions coming up with new products in order to challenge some of the less scrupulous lenders out there. That Flexi Loan has an APR of 9.9%, which seems pretty reasonable to me. Of course, many of us, even on decent salaries, can face particular challenges at the end of a given month, so the more alternative, decent products that are available, the better. I know, having spoken to the Scottish Police Credit Union, that they are keen for other credit unions to make use of their work and develop the products that they have invented. There's no point reinventing the wheel. So I'm very happy to support this motion, and I hope we can make progress in growing the credit union movement. Thank you.
Many thanks. And I now call Anne McTaggart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I am delighted to contribute to this debate on the subject of the recently announced credit union expansion project. And I also congratulate John-Wilson-MSP on securing time in the Chamber to consider the positive effects of this project for people on low incomes. And to add to that, to welcome the members from the Cross-Party Working Group and Credit Unions and to the Director of ABCUL also in the gallery tonight. The Association of British Credit Unions has been awarded a contract of £38 million to modernise and grow the credit union industry to discourage reliance on non-standard forms of credit such as payday loans. This is welcome news for families on low incomes right across the UK who have for too long been subject to the exploitative business practices of payday lenders, charging up to 6,000% interest for short-term credit. This expansion will contribute to the continued revival of community credit unions, and it is expected that Scotland will benefit significantly from this investment, enabling local credit unions to offer a greater range of products to customers, in turn supporting our local economies. I welcome the announcement of this project and strongly believe that the promotion of credit unions is the most effective means of discouraging vulnerable people from relying on payday loan companies at the end of each month. Presiding Officer, I am proud to support the aims of the Debt Busters campaign in Glasgow, and I thank my colleague Kezia Dugdale MSP for all the work that she has undertaken to highlight the long-term consequences of loan sharks operating in our local communities. The Debt Busters campaign has illustrated the reality that companies offering payday loans have increased their market share by over 400% in the last 3 years. They now represent a significant presence on our high streets in towns and cities across Scotland, particularly in Glasgow. It is right that action be taken to provide an alternative to payday loan companies across the country, and I support the decision to promote credit union organisations as the natural alternative to an industry that has relied on the misfortune of families on low incomes for too long. Furthermore, I welcome the recent decision by Glasgow City Council to establish a credit union account with an initial deposit of £10 for every first-year pupil across the city. This is a long-term strategy which will help to educate young people about how to manage finances and will encourage greater uptake of the services offered by credit unions, which are no longer limited to basic bank account facilities. The refusal of Glasgow City Council to let any of its commercial property to payday loan companies further illustrates Labour's commitment to stopping the exploitation of vulnerable people and our determination to promote credit unions as a workable and realistic alternative, and one that local communities can rely upon. I encourage the Scottish Government to adopt this approach and to invest in the Association of British Credit Unions so that this initiative can deliver real improvements in the services offered by credit union organisations right across the country. Thank you.
Many thanks. I now invite Fergus Ewing to respond to the debate. Minister, if you could do so in 7 minutes, I'd be obliged.
Thank you very much indeed, Presiding Officer. I very much welcome the debate instituted by John Wilson this evening and pay tribute to himself and the other members of the cross-party group. He chairs the group excellently, and it's one of the most active of the cross-party groups in this Parliament, as I know from my engagement with it previously. I look forward to continuing that engagement in future, and I very much welcome that many of the members, Presiding Officer, of that group, other than MSPs, have taken the time to join us this evening for this important debate. And I also very much welcome the announcement that the Association of British Credit Unions Limited has won the contract to deliver the DWP's credit union expansion project. There is a significant unmet demand for banking products amongst low-income consumers, and the credit union is there in part to fill that gap, and it does that extremely well, and we are absolutely determined to assist it to do even better in future, and all members have said that. Mary Scanlon has pointed to the fact that we need to kind of improve our act in relation to other countries, Ireland. I think she's absolutely right. I think that point was made by other members from the Labour benches too. There is no dispute as to the objectives which are largely shared in this chamber, I think, across party, and I think it does no harm to acknowledge that at all, because we hope that, so far as possible, these matters can be pursued without political emphasis. I know that the DWP's aim is in providing the investment of 38 million, to which, of course, we contribute in Scotland our share, is to help the sector provide financial services for up to 1 million more consumers on lower incomes, and to do so in a way that helps credit unions to modernise, expand and become financially sustainable. It should not be forgotten that the onus, the burden of responding to and complying with the financial regulations which apply to the financial sector is particularly onerous. It is demanding, it is exacting, it imposes a burden on all institutions, including the credit unions, something I think which merits very careful consideration to see what more can be done in that respect. That, sadly, is out with our power. Scottish credit unions are set to benefit. 2 Scottish credit unions, Pollack and First Alliance Ayrshire, as John Wilson, I think, alluded to in his speech, are already involved in the first wave of the project, and a further 7 have signed up for the second and third phases, and that's very much to be welcomed. We have in the Scottish Government been consistently supportive of credit unions, and I think we enjoy good relationships with their leaders and their representative bodies, including ABCUL. We are determined to consider very carefully the recommendations which ABCUL have made, most recently in the briefing to members, presiding officer, such as to boost membership across a wide variety of areas in the public sector and the private sector. We are actively considering measures to see how we can assist to that end. Since 2009, credit unions have benefited from significant Scottish Government investment to develop and expand their business. 32 credit unions received a total of £1.3 million from the Third Sector Enterprise Fund, and a Scottish Investment Fund investment of £1 million to a partnership between Capital and ScotWest has enabled them to develop efficiencies as well as new products and increase their membership. And I was pleased but not surprised to see that a distinguished leader in the credit union movement has now gone on to head the Airdrie Savings Bank, which shows that the credit unions should not be considered as the poor man's bank at all. They are there for everybody, presiding officer, and they provide services at a very high professional standard, I think, as all members across the chamber have acknowledged. We actively encourage credit unions to apply for business support training, like the Just Enterprise programme, and we make sure they're aware of funding programmes that are available to third sector organisations. Now, Kezia Dugdale mentioned a meeting, and we had a very cordial meeting, and I was very grateful to have the opportunity to engage with her, and we will reply to her as in terms of the undertaking, the precise nature of which I must confess I don't have in front of me, but I will do what I promised to do, and I welcome her engagement. I've asked my officials to explore a number of ideas about how we can do more to support the movement and encourage more people to become members and increase awareness, as Sandra White has rightly suggested. There is always more that we can do, and I think there is no dispute or quarrel about this. We all want to do everything practical and sensible that we can, and that is what we set out to do. I can also say, presiding officer, regarding funding, and this was raised by Mr Finlay, that we are establishing a new fund that will distribute £6 million between 2013, this year, and 2015 to help maintain, develop and grow Scotland's enterprising third sector. This fund will be open to applications later this year, and we will encourage eligible credit unions to apply. Now, many members have referred to specific initiatives by credit unions, and I think the point I would make, without repeating them, is what an incredible variety of imaginative and innovative solutions credit unions are engaged in. And I think, well, all right. Yes.
Neil Finlay.
I may be wrong, but I think my understanding is that when the previous third sector funds were announced, that no credit unions were funded through that scheme. I think that may be the problem.
Minister.
Well, we are always happy to work in a positive way with the credit unions, and I've mentioned the funding we've extended in the past, and I've mentioned the funding that will be available now, or at least from later this year. And we will always work very closely with credit unions in all practical ways to assist them in every way possible. I would also say that in relation to other areas of debt that we work closely and value the credit union's advice in these respects. And just this morning, Presiding Officer, I moved and successfully moved regulations under the debt arrangement scheme, which was approved in order to extend the assistance there from the date of application instead of the date of approval. That will help those who suffer the iniquities of the extortionate interest rates and payday loans. I wish we had the power to tackle that here. I haven't time to address in full the points about welfare reform, but the Scottish Government is doing everything that we can to mitigate these. But I must point out to Mr Finlay that, no, I'm afraid we are running out of time, and I have given away already. But I think it's reasonable to point out, Mr Finlay, that we have committed a total of £40 million to ensure that 560,000 people who were receiving council tax benefit are protected from the UK Government's 10% cut in successor arrangement funding. We're providing £9.2 million for the Scottish Welfare Fund. We're assisting local authorities in various ways. And the third sector, Mr Finlay, oh, that we had the power in this Parliament to deal with these things, because we do not have, as Mr Finlay, I think, knows, although he's raising his voice now, but I think he does realise that these powers over welfare reform and the bedroom tax and the matters he raised are powers that are being exercised over us from the Westminster Parliament. We, Presiding Officer, working with the credit unions and the excellent people who work for them all around the country, are doing everything we can to do what we think is right for this country, and we very much look forward to the day when we can exercise decision-making over all of these matters in this place.
Thank you. That concludes John Wilson's debate on credit unions, and I now close this meeting of Parliament.